everyone, this is Professor Benjamin, and in this session we are going to cover urban ecosystems. So this is kind of where we live in the city, and urban ecosystems, of course, are different ecosystems than suburban ecosystems, and that's why a lot of the articles and things that you're going to read are related to cities, and so you're going to kind of think about that and zero in on that this week as we go through this session. So there is the description is here, and of course you always want to read the description on what's due. There's no really textbook chapter reading that goes with this session, specifically in the text in the OER textbook. There is a PowerPoint here. And then there's a lot of additional readings and podcasts, and that's really where you're going to draw most of your material this week. There's a couple things in the PowerPoint that I want you to zero in on, which are what are the positive and negative consequences of urban sprawl, which is the fact of when people leave cities and go out to the suburbs, and then they live in bigger houses with more stuff. In fact, there was a really great book, and I heard a really cool piece on NPR the other day, and I'll put it in the announcement, but a woman was being reviewed about her book that's called Crap, and it's really a great book about low cost items and what is the effect on the world and on not political landscape, sorry, my mind's in what's happening next Tuesday, but on everything that's kind of like the trickle down effect to everyone. And so I'll include that information in the announcements. But that crap is a good word for it. But when people move from urban ecosystems out to suburbs, there's a lot of consequences to that. Number one, people drive cars more because there's not really access to public transportation or efficient public transportation in the suburbs. Number two, people have bigger houses, which means they fill them up with more stuff. Number three, a lot of times people work more hours because they have bigger houses, they pay more taxes, so you actually see people less. Obesity levels rise because individuals don't walk as much or exercise as much, because really in cities you're walking more, you're accessing that walkability factor. So there's a lot involved with suburbs and urban sprawl. There's more paving over of areas, which then leads to, of course, more runoff and surface water runoff issues. So there's a lot involved in that, and I think you want to think about those things in terms of that. Then there's the cost of color of America's political landscape. I think this is really cool. It actually shows you where Democrats and Republicans are located based upon where they live, either in cities or suburbs. So really cool little kind of reading. NPR had a really good thing on the rising heat bakes U.S. cities. The poor often feel it most. So the heat island effect, of course, is something we need to talk about in terms of urban ecosystems. And that is the fact that in cities, yes, a lot is paved over. In suburbs, yes, some stuff is paved over. But the concrete reflects heat. And what happens is that's why in cities we have more ground level smog, because the heat is trapped at surface level. Buildings trap it, that the heat island effect traps it, whereas grass actually absorbs heat. And so that you can see is the heat island effect in cities, and that's why city temperatures are higher than suburb temperatures. And so I think I have a graphic in the PowerPoint that shows you that. But you'll always see at night the temperatures drop lower in the suburbs than they do in the city, and that's because the heat island effect, meaning that all those surfaces reflect that heat and it's trapped at surface level. So you want to look at that. Abandoned railway turns urban sprawl green. And this actually was slated for right behind CCP's campus. There's an old paper, an old SEPTA train tracks that used to actually take paper to the Philadelphia Inquirer. And that there's been a big political kind of back and forth on who owns that property and then what they were going to do with that property. And there actually was talk about that becoming an underground park system that was going to connect from one side of the city to the other. I don't know if that's going to happen. That was in the works for a couple years, but I haven't heard much about it since. And then a lot of this is talking about cities of tomorrow being more green and sustainable cities. And there are some wonderful cities out there who've taken on this initiative and have done fantastic jobs. So that means any new construction has to be sustainable. And that might mean that they have to put in green roofs or contain their groundwater through rain barrels or rain collection systems. All of the appliances and all of the windows, etc., are energy efficient. For a while there in East Falls, they were talking about a zero emission apartment complex that hasn't come to fruition, but it was definitely slated to do that. And everyone who lived there was going to kind of have that idea that they were going to have zero emissions. So it was a different mindset of individuals who would live there. So, the ideas are out there. There are actually certain countries that have embraced this. And so, Philadelphia has a green plan. We've tried to go zero emissions. I mean, that would never happen, but you can offset emissions in specific ways. All ideas of this new idea of urban living, which is you eat, live, work, play all in one area, and at the same time, you're living sustainably. And then there's a lot of really great podcasts here on terms of density or destiny, squatter cities, because we are going to have to eventually take note to and accept squatter cities. And I know this is definitely a hot topic in the city of Philadelphia with our homeless encampments, but they are squatter cities. And throughout the world, those squatter cities are known as slums. And in a lot of these countries, especially in India, right, these individuals live outside the city limits in these they've created their own cities. There are people who are in charge in those cities. There are actually economics happening in those cities with different currencies. So there's a lot going on in cities, in these squatter cities. Sometimes they elect their own individuals who are in charge. And at some point, we're going to need to understand that millions of people live in squatter cities throughout the world. And we're going to have to accept those and figure out ways that these individuals can access clean water. They can access a safe way to use sewer services. And we're going to have to do that. And if you even looked in the Philadelphia encampments, they put out actually porta potties, and they put out water systems because these individuals that lived in these cities, in these encampments, the homeless individuals, needed access to these things. And so whether your beliefs are we should provide these or not, we need to accept that squatter cities exist, and we need to understand that individuals live in these cities, people live in these cities, and how are we going to bridge that gap? So that's something there. And then what does nature tell us about cities? This is really cool. So what organisms and biodiversity live in specific cities versus suburbs. So this is another great article. So all of this will help you answer, of course, the forum post questions. Initial post due by Tuesday, response post due by Friday. I hope you enjoy this week. This is kind of a lighter week, and I really would love for you to really think about that and understand that, the concepts that are going on during this session. Okay. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Next week we'll do population, then water, and in water is your last assignment for the semester, besides the final exam and of course the forum posts, etc. But we're moving towards the end of the semester, so please stay strong and have a fantastic week.